I think for a long time, my fear of what recovery would look like was so much bigger than the pain of my actual life. I was terrified of what would happen if people knew the truth, so I just kept pretending the pain wasn't that bad.
But there comes a tipping point, doesn't there?
Yeah.
That moment David talks about in Psalm 6, where your soul is just in deep anguish. You realize that keeping up the denial is actually hurting you more than the truth ever could. That's the first real action of recovery. It's when the pain finally surpasses the fear and you say, Lord, have mercy on me. I can't fake this anymore. If you're at that point today, if you're tired of trying to control what is clearly unmanageable, you are in the exact right place for Jesus to meet you.
Yeah. And that right there, that is exactly what we are talking about today. Welcome, everyone. We're so incredibly glad you're here with us, joining the conversation at the Crosstalk Cafe at Peters Creek Baptist Church in South Park, Pennsylvania.
We really are. It's so good to be with you guys.
Because today we are entering the final stretch of Principle 1 here in the cafe. Right. I mean, if you've been sitting at the table with us over these last few conversations, we have spent a lot of time, a significant amount of time, in that really necessary, heavy space of realization.
Yeah, that realization phase is no joke.
It's not. We've done a lot of talking about, what it actually means to recognize that we are not God.
Which is a tough pill to swallow for most of us.
Oh, absolutely. And we've defined what it looks like when our lives become entirely unmanageable. We've just sort of sat in the uncomfortable truth of our own powerlessness. But today, the ground shifts a bit.
It really does. We're moving.
Yeah, we are moving out of that realization phase and bridging directly into the action phase. Because, realization without action doesn't actually lead to healing. Right?
Yeah, no, not at all. It just leaves you completely stuck.
Exactly. You're fully aware of your misery, but totally paralyzed to change it. So today, we are launching a 4-part action plan to finish Principle 1. There are 4 specific actions we have to take, and today we are focusing entirely on Action 1, which is stop denying the pain.
Stop denying the pain.
Yeah, and I just want to speak directly to you, listening right now, whether you're driving or sitting in your living room or out taking a walk. This first action is usually the hardest thing you will ever do.
Easily the hardest.
Yeah, it requires an agonizing level of courage, and we're going to explore exactly why that is today.
Because it's the threshold, right? It's the door you have to walk through before any other form of healing can even be introduced into your life.
Right.
When we talk about moving from realization to action, we really have to respect the sheer magnitude of what we're asking of ourselves and what we're asking of you. Admitting powerlessness in a broad, philosophical way, that's relatively easy.
Sure, yeah.
Most people can sit in a coffee shop and say, well, nobody's perfect, or we all have our struggles.
Oh, yeah, the generalities are easy.
Exactly. It's totally abstract. But Action 1 demands that we just abandon the abstract entirely. It requires us to step into the incredibly personal, deeply uncomfortable reality of our own specific, naming it out loud pain.
Yes.
Stopping the denial means dropping the defenses that you have spent years, and in many cases decades, carefully constructing. It means turning around and looking directly at the very thing you've spent your entire adult life running away from.
Which is terrifying.
It's completely terrifying. And we want to start our conversation today with a real heart-to-heart, deeply empathetic tone, because we are peers in this. We aren't speaking from a pedestal here. We are friends walking this exact road of a recovery right alongside you.
Absolutely.
And we know firsthand that the moment right before you finally stop denying the pain, it feels like standing on the edge of a sheer cliff in pitch darkness. You have absolutely no idea what is at the bottom, and you are being asked to step off.
Yeah. That sensation of stepping off into the void is so visceral.
Yeah.
Because for so long, the denial hasn't felt like a lie, has it?
No.
It's felt like the only solid ground we had left. It felt like absolute survival. And I think that points us directly to the first major reality we need to confront today, which is the heavy, just crushing burden of faking it.
Oh, man. The faking it.
Right. Before we ever get to Action 1, before we actually stop denying the pain, we spend an enormous, almost incomprehensible amount of human energy trying to convince ourselves and absolutely everyone else around us that we are completely fine.
Yep. We hold on to this illusion of control with a white-knuckled grip.
Exactly. So let's talk about the raw, daily reality of that performance. Because from the outside, a person locked in denial usually doesn't look like they're falling apart, do they?
No, not usually. In fact, the most dangerous denial is often found in the highly functioning people.
Yes.
They might be, leading PTA or running a successful mid-sized business, organizing community events.
Or showing up to church every single Sunday with an impeccable smile and a perfectly pressed shirt.
Right. But on the inside, there is this profound systemic depletion. You are completely drained of your physical and emotional resources, yet the script you've written for your life demands that you hit your marks and keep performing.
Yeah.
You are running on less than empty, but still managing the logistics of a flawless facade.
And the logistics of that facade are what eventually break a person.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about the sheer cognitive load required to maintain a double life. Or even just a severely, heavily edited version of your life.
It's a full-time job.
It is. You aren't just living, you're managing a public relations campaign for your own existence.
That's a great way to put it.
You're constantly monitoring what people know, what they might suspect, what you let slip in a moment of frustration yesterday, and what you need to cover it up tomorrow. It requires a hypervigilance that just ravages the nervous system.
It totally does. You're living in a chronic state of fight or flight. You're always waiting for the other's shoe to drop, always anticipating the moment of exposure.
Right.
And the physical toll of that chronic stress is staggering. The body keeps the score. When you are suppressing a secret, your body is flooded with stress hormones.
Oh, the body always knows.
It does. It manifests as chronic muscle tension, digestive issues, a racing heart, an inability to get restorative sleep. You are waking up every morning already entirely depleted.
Waking up completely wiped out.
Exactly. And then you have to put on the suit or the uniform or the smile and go do it all again. It's a slow, quiet attrition of your life force. And it's vital to understand that this denial is not usually a conscious, malicious deception.
Right. People aren't usually trying to be evil.
No. Very often, it is a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. We use it when we genuinely believe at a core fundamental level that we simply cannot survive the truth.
Wow. Yeah.
We convince ourselves that if the full reality of our hurt, our habit, or our hang-up were to be exposed to the light of day, it would obliterate us. It would destroy our families, ruin our reputations, and shatter our very identity.
Okay, but I have to push back a little bit here. I have to challenge the idea that denial is always a bad thing.
Okay, go for it.
Let's look at this objectively. From a psychological standpoint, isn't denial actually a highly effective, even necessary coping mechanism sometimes? I mean, if a person is in the middle of a massive, overwhelming crisis, say a sudden trauma, a devastating loss, or the initial onset of a severe addiction, taking off that protective layer of denial right away might completely paralyze them. Doesn't the human mind deliberately use denial to protect us from going into shock?
It does.
Because if we felt the full weight of our pain all at once, wouldn't it just crush us entirely? It seems to me that we cling to denial because, for a time at least, it actually works. It keeps us functioning when the truth would render us completely incapable of getting out of bed. Why is it our default human setting? What are we trying to prove?
Well, that is a critical distinction to make, and it completely reframes how we view our own struggles.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right that in acute moments of trauma, denial acts as a psychological shock absorber.
Right.
It is the mind's way of pacing the intake of devastating reality. If you break your leg, the body floods the system with adrenaline and endorphin so you don't feel the full agony immediately, which allows you to drag yourself to safety. Psychological denial operates the exact same way in the short term. It allows you to survive the initial impact. The problem, really the tragedy of the human condition, is that we take a temporary emergency survival mechanism and we turn it into a permanent zip code.
Oh, wow.
We build a house there. We mistake the shock absorber for a cure.
It's like we leave the cast on the broken bone for 10 years.
Yes, perfect. And what happens when you leave a cast on for a decade? The bone might have set, but the muscle completely atrophies. Limb becomes useless.
Wow.
The protective shell eventually becomes the very thing that cripples you. What was meant to keep you safe from immediate psychological shock now keeps you isolated from any possibility of genuine human connection or spiritual healing. This is where the interplay of pride and fear becomes so toxic.
Yeah, talk about that, the pride and the fear.
Well, our pride tells us that we should be entirely self-sufficient. It whispers the lie that needing help is a fatal flaw, that a successful adult ought to be able to manage their own life, fix their own internal chaos, and cure their own pain in private.
Yeah, that we should just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Exactly. To admit that we are powerless. To admit that a substance, a behavior, or a past trauma has gotten the better of us. It feels like a catastrophic failure of the self. We desperately want to believe we still hold the power.
We want to hold the pen and write our own story. Even if the story we're writing is an absolute tragedy, we find a strange, perverse comfort in the fact that we are the ones holding the pen.
Right.
We would rather be the author of our own destruction than surrender the pen to someone else.
That desire for autonomy is deeply, deeply rooted.
Yeah.
And intertwined with that pride is a great paralyzer, which is fear. If pride builds the wall, fear guards the gate.
Yeah, that's good.
We are terrified of the tangible consequences of the truth. We run the calculus in our heads every single day. If my spouse, if my children, if my friends at church really knew the depth of my struggle, the darkness of my habit, the ugly reality of what was done to me or what I've done, would they still love me? Would they walk away?
It's terrifying.
We fear the judgment and the rejection of others, but we also fear the vast unknown of our own identity. Who am I if I am not the strong one who has it all together? Who am I without this coping mechanism, this habit that has faithfully numbed my pain every night for the last 5 years?
Wow.
So the pride says, I don't need help, I can handle this. And the fear says, even if I do need help, asking for it will cost me everything I hold dear. Those two forces lock us into the cycle. We keep performing. We keep faking it day after day until the internal weight becomes utterly unbearable.
And when that weight finally becomes unbearable, we arrive at the central concept of this entire phase of recovery. It is the absolute catalyst for Action 1. We are talking about the tipping point.
The tipping point.
This is the foundational mathematics of human change, and it is a terrifying equation. We only change when our pain finally surpasses our fear. I want you to really hear that. We only change when our pain finally surpasses our fear. Right now, if you are struggling, there are two opposing forces constantly doing battle on the scales of your life. On one side of the scale, you have the fear of change. And as we just discussed, that fear is massive. It holds the weight of your reputation, your relationships, your comfort, and your identity. It asks terrifying questions about what the process of recovery will actually demand of you. The fear of having to feel the raw, unmedicated reality of your life is incredibly heavy.
The gravity of that fear cannot be overstated. Change represents stepping off the map into foreign, uncharted territory. Even if your current situation is utterly miserable, it is a familiar misery.
You know it.
You know the exact dimensions of your cage. You know how to navigate the specific chaos of your dysfunction. You've mapped out the exact contours of your hidden pain, and you know how to tiptoe around the tripwires. To choose recovery is to blindfold yourself and step into a void. And human beings, by our very psychological makeup, will almost always choose a familiar misery over an unfamiliar hope. We will cling to the known dysfunction right up until the exact moment the familiar misery becomes literally unsurvivable.
And that unsurvivable moment is what we call hitting the wall. That is the other side of the scale. You have the fear of change on one side, but on the other side, you have the pain of staying the same.
Yeah.
You have the profound, hollow isolation of living a secret life, knowing that no one actually knows the real you. You have the broken promises, the shattered trust in your relationships, the look in your spouse's eyes when you've let them down again. You have the internal emptiness, the physical toll, the mental fatigue of keeping the lies straight.
It's so much weight.
As long as you are more afraid of the truth than you are of the addiction, the habit, or the hang-up, the scale stays tipped toward the illusion of control. You will stay locked in denial, but eventually you hit the wall. The pain of maintaining the secret simply becomes too heavy to bear. The pain finally, definitively outweighs the fear.
It tips the scale.
Right, and to really make the mechanics of this clear, to understand why the pain of staying the same accelerates so drastically, we need to look at how hidden things behave. Think about a physical wound that has been left entirely untreated.
Okay.
Imagine you have a deep, jagged gash on your arm, but instead of cleaning it, instead of going to a doctor and seeking treatment, you wrap it up tightly. You hide it under a heavy, thick winter coat so nobody can see it.
Right. Out of sight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You go about your days, going to the grocery store, sitting in meetings, smiling, chatting, pretending your arm is perfectly fine. But beneath that heavy coat, in the dark and the damp, the wound isn't in stasis. It isn't just pausing.
No, it's getting worse.
It is actively festering. The infection is setting in.
If we look closely in the biology of that kind of infection, it perfectly mirrors the pathology of psychological denial. The most dangerous infections are caused by anaerobic bacteria. These are bacteria that literally die when exposed to oxygen.
Wow.
They require dark, suffocating, enclosed environments to multiply and thrive. When you wrap that wound and hide it under the heavy coat, You are creating the absolute perfect anaerobic environment. You are starving the wound of the oxygen and light it needs to heal, and you are providing the exact conditions the infection needs to ravage the tissue.
That is wild.
Psychological shame, hidden habits, and unaddressed trauma operate on the exact same biological principle. They are anaerobic. They thrive in the absence of truth. They multiply in isolation. The denial doesn't just hide the pain, it actively incubates it.
That is a terrifying reality. It incubates it. So as the days go by under that heavy coat, the anaerobic infection spreads. The arm begins to throb with a deep, sickening heat. You feel the fever rising in your own body, a systemic response to the localized secret. The smell of the infection starts to linger, and you become paranoid, terrified that someone standing too close to you is going to notice. But you are still terrified of going to the doctor. You know, the doctor will have to unwrap it.
They'll have to look at it.
They will have to expose the ugly, festering, necrotic reality to the bright fluorescent light of the clinic. And you know, the cleaning process, scrubbing out the infection, will be pure agony. The fear of the doctor, the fear of the light, the fear of the pain of the cure keeps you hiding the wound.
Right.
But eventually, the infection gets so bad, the fever spikes so high, that the throbbing, burning agony of the untreated wound becomes utterly intolerable. The pain of the hidden infection becomes infinitely worse than the fear of going to the doctor and having it exposed to the light. You finally reach a point where you tear off the heavy coat and say, I don't care how much it hurts to treat this. I don't care what the doctor has to do. I cannot live with this hidden infection for one more second.
Yeah.
That is hitting the wall. That is the tipping point.
It is the paradox of exposure. The very thing the brain interprets as a lethal threat, bringing the secret into the light, is actually the only available cure. The denial is the heavy coat. It hides the reality from the world, and it attempts to hide the reality from yourself.
But it fails.
It does. But when you finally hit that wall, when the fever takes over and the scale tips, we have to recognize that it is rarely a moment of triumphant victory.
Oh, no. Not at all.
Movies and books often portray the moment of changing one's life as this empowering, victorious decision filled with resolve and swelling music. But in reality, hitting the wall is usually a moment of profound, crushing defeat. It is a moment of utter surrender.
Yeah.
You aren't storming the gates of recovery like a conquering hero who has finally seen the light. You are crawling through the doors of the Crossroads Cafe, completely depleted, your armor shattered, simply because your legs have given out, and you cannot take one more single step under the weight of the heavy coat.
It's a surrender born of absolute, undeniable necessity. You are out of options, out of fuel, and out of lies. And having established what that tipping point is, what the mechanism of that wall actually feels like, we really need to turn our focus to the Word of God.
Absolutely.
We need to see exactly what this looks like in the life of someone who hit their own wall, who experienced that total collapse of resources. Because this dynamic we are discussing isn't some modern psychological phenomenon discovered in a clinic last decade. This is the timeless, unshakable struggle of the human soul.
It really is.
We are going to look directly at Psalm chapter 6, verses 2 and 3, to understand King David's experience of hitting the absolute end of his rope.
Turning to the Word of God here is so vital because it completely strips away the modern stigma we attach to mental and emotional collapse. It validates the severe depth of the struggle. It shows us that God is not shocked by our breaking points.
Yeah, he isn't surprised.
He doesn't look away in disgust when we hit the wall. He has documented these moments. He understands the mechanics of them intimately, and he meets us precisely within them. Listen to the absolute desperation in David's plea in Psalm 6. He says, "Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord, how long?"
Wow.
When you read those words, you are reading the exact transcript of a man who has hit the wall at terminal velocity. Notice the totality of David's breakdown. He is not saying, "I'm having a tough week," or "I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by my responsibilities."
Oh.
This is the absolute definitive end of his emotional, physical, and spiritual resources. He says, "I am faint." The Hebrew root there implies a complete loss of vital energy, a wilting, a fading away. He cannot fake it anymore. And then he moves from the general to the terrifyingly specific. He says, "Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony."
His bones, he doesn't say his muscles are tired or his headaches. He says his bones are in agony. The deepest, most foundational, structural element of his physical body is in torment. This implies a pain that has bypassed the surface and penetrated the very core of his being.
It is a profound clinical and spiritual observation. It highlights a truth about denial and hidden pain that we touched on earlier, which is that spiritual and emotional denial eventually and inevitably manifests as severe physical trauma.
The body keeps the score.
It really does. You cannot sever the mind, the spirit, and the body. They are an integrated system. When the soul is in deep anguish, as David says, the physical body absorbs the shockwaves. The chronic stress of carrying a hidden addiction, the crushing weight of unresolved grief, the relentless vigilance required to maintain a public facade, these things ravage the physical architecture of the body.
And that's so true.
They show up as autoimmune flare-ups, as chronic skeletal pain, as migraines that blind you, as a complete depletion of the immune system. David is experiencing the profound physical collapse that follows a prolonged, unacknowledged spiritual and emotional struggle. He is literally experiencing the fever of the hidden anaerobic wound. His body is screaming the truth that his pride had been trying to suppress.
My soul is in deep anguish. The translation of that feeling, the reality of what it means for a soul to be in anguish is just, it's so incredibly heavy. He is broken on every possible level, structurally, emotionally, spiritually. But I want to pause here and really push back on the context of who is actually writing these words.
Okay.
Because if we just read this as a poem, we miss the gravity of the situation. David was not a helpless victim of circumstance. He wasn't a powerless peasant at the mercy of the elements. He was a king. He was the absolute monarch of the historical Near East. He had massive, incalculable wealth. He commanded armies that could wipe out cities. He lived in fortified palaces. He had advisors, servants, and the ability to summon literally anything he wanted with a single word. He had the ultimate peak level of human authority and control in his earthly kingdom. Yet here he is, reduced to a puddle on the floor, completely broken, crying out that his bones are in agony.
It's a huge contrast.
Doesn't this shatter the modern myth we all buy into? Doesn't this show us unequivocally that absolutely no amount of worldly power, no amount of status, wealth, or environmental control can protect us from the consequences of our own unmanageable pain?
Oh, without a doubt.
We try so incredibly hard to insulate ourselves, don't we? We think, if I just get the promotion and make 6 figures, the anxiety will go away. Or, if I just build the bigger house in the better neighborhood, my marriage will stop hurting. Or, if I just control my children's schedules perfectly and curate my Instagram feed, the depression won't be able to reach me. We build these elaborate fortresses of control, but David had a literal fortress, and it couldn't shield him from the anguish of his own soul.
That is perhaps the most crucial observation we can make from this text. David's worldly power was absolute, but in the face of his spiritual and emotional reality, his heavy golden crown meant absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
It was just another useless prop. His armies couldn't fight the battle that was raging inside his own mind. His vast wealth couldn't purchase a single ounce of peace for his tortured soul. It is a stark, unavoidable warning to all of us living in a culture that worships success and control. We spend our entire lives trying to build impregnable fortresses of reputation, of financial security, of social standing, truly believing that these things will somehow immunize us against the human condition.
But they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
Because unmanageable pain, the deep soul anguish that comes from our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, does not respect your tax bracket.
Yeah.
It does not check your resume before it enters your life. It does not care about your job title or how many people report to you. You can be the CEO of a massive Fortune 500 company. You can be the most respected leader in your community, or you can be a literal king on a throne and still find yourself curled up on the bathroom floor in the dark at 3 a.m. crying out, "How long, Lord? How long?" David's immense earthly power couldn't save him from himself, and neither can our own frantic attempts at control. We have to face the pain to get through it. There's no bypassing it with money, and there's no outranking it with status. Worldly power is often just the most expensive, socially acceptable form of denial. It is just a highly funded way of faking it.
Man, that hits hard. A highly funded way of faking it. And look at the vulnerability of that final question he asks. How long, Lord? How long? That is not a theological inquiry. That is the prayer of absolute, unconditional surrender. It is the white flag going up from the fortress.
Yeah, it is.
Notice what David isn't doing here. He has completely stopped trying to fix the situation himself. He isn't offering God a strategic 10-point plan for his own recovery. He isn't negotiating terms. He isn't saying, Lord, if you just give me a little bit of strength, I will handle the rest of this mess. He is just laying bare his complete, fundamental inability to endure the pain on his own power for one more single moment.
The pride is gone.
It is the primal cry of a soul that has finally allowed the pain to surpass the fear. It is the sound of the tipping point.
It is the sound of the heavy coat hitting the floor. And that brings us directly to the absolute necessity of Action 1. We must face the agony, and we must deeply understand the profound deception of our own denial. We have to look at the actual mechanism of denial to understand why it is so imperative to abandon it right now. As we discussed earlier, denial acts primarily like a numbing agent. It provides temporary, localized relief from the immediate, sharp sting of reality. When the truth of your situation, your addiction, or your failing marriage is too sharp, too blinding to look at, denial throws a heavy, dark blanket over the light. It dulls the sharp edges of your reality. It is the psychological anesthetic that allows you to get out of bed, go to work, and function on a superficial, robotic level.
But the anesthetic is a complete lie. It doesn't heal the tissue, it just masks the sensation of the tissue dying.
Exactly. And the danger of this numbing agent goes far beyond just masking the pain. While it numbs the surface, it traps the infection inside, allowing the anaerobic bacteria to multiply. But there's a second, equally devastating tragedy to this numbing agent. Human emotion is not compartmentalized.
That's a good point.
You cannot selectively numb your feelings. You cannot take a shot of emotional Novocaine that only targets your shame, your grief, or your fear. If you shut down your capacity to feel the deep, terrifying depths of your sorrow, you simultaneously, biologically shut down your capacity to feel the heights of your joy, your connection, and your love. The mechanism that turns down the volume on your pain also turns down the volume on your entire life. You become a hollow shell, a spectator walking through your own life, completely disconnected from your true self, deeply disconnected from God, and utterly isolated from the people who are desperately trying to love you.
You become a ghost, haunting your own house. You are physically present at the dinner table, but you are a million miles away, trapped behind the wall of the numbing agent.
You do. You become inaccessible. And this leads us to a vital foundational spiritual truth that we must clarify right now, because it is the exact place where so many people get stuck and turn back toward the denial. Facing the agony, stepping out of the shadows, and looking directly at the festering wound is not meant to punish you.
Yeah, please hear this.
Let me repeat that, and I want you to let this sink into your heart. God is not asking you to look at your pain in order to shame you. He is not a cruel, vindictive taskmaster forcing you to stare at your failures, your addictions, or your brokenness so he can berate you or say, "I told you so."
Yeah.
The enemy of your soul wants you to believe that if you look at your pain, you will only find condemnation. The enemy tells you that the light will burn you to ash. But God is calling you out of the denial because facing the pain is the only functional way to walk through it and come out the other side.
Because he is the great physician. Think about what a doctor does. A surgeon doesn't expose a festering wound to shame the patient for being injured. The surgeon doesn't turn on the bright operating lights to mock the patient for letting the infection get so bad. The doctor exposes the wound for one singular purpose, to bring healing.
Amen.
The light is a tool of restoration, not a weapon of condemnation.
That is the perfect distinction. If we want to be rid of our pain, we must confront its reality. The deep deception of denial whispers in your ear every day that owning is safe. It tells you that the dark is your friend. The truth of recovery, the truth of the Word of God tells you that hiding is fatal and exposure is the only path back to life. God invites us into the light, not to judge the mess we have made, but to cleanse it.
I want to share a heart-to-heart thought on this process because there is something incredibly profound, almost supernatural, that happens in that specific, terrifying moment when you finally drop the heavy burden of denial. When you finally take off the coat, point to the wound and say, "Look at this, it's infected and I'm dying."
Yeah.
At the moment of admission, the actual physical moment, you say the words out loud to another human being, "I have a problem, my life is completely unmanageable, I am in absolute agony." That moment is excruciating. It feels like every single one of your worst fears is coming true all at once. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your voice shakes.
That's terrifying.
But the very second after that admission, the second after the words leave your mouth, is the first real breath of true, unadulterated freedom you have taken in years. It is the most beautiful paradox of recovery. You spend a decade convinced that the admission is going to crush you, that the truth will be a lethal blow, but instead the release of the secret is what allows you to finally stand up straight. In that moment, you realize the draining game is over. You don't have to keep track of the intricate web of lies anymore.
Thank God.
You don't have to manage the lighting on your facade. The absolute worst thing about you is finally out in the open, exposed to the light, and you look around and realize you are still breathing. The relief that washes over you when you finally stop fighting the truth is indescribable. It is the deep, settling peace that comes when the endless war with yourself finally ends.
That initial breath of freedom is the air of grace.
Mm.
It is the atmosphere of the kingdom of God. It is the precise moment you realize that your worst fear, the deeply held belief that the truth would destroy you, was a complete fabrication. The truth doesn't destroy you, it shatters the cage you are living in. It destroys the disease, not the patient. And now that we have established the absolute biological and spiritual necessity of dropping the denial, it is time to turn the focus directly onto your life. Right now, wherever you are listening to this, we need to move from the theological and psychological concept of action one into the gritty, personal reality of your own next steps today.
This is where the rubber meets the road. We can talk about David, and we can talk about the mechanics of pain, but it means nothing if it doesn't intersect with your reality. This is the moment of personal inventory. And I want to ask you a direct question. I want you to really pause, stop whatever else you're focusing on, and let this question sit heavy on your heart. We are not rushing past this.
Take your time with it.
Of what are you still in denial, or what are you still trying to control in your own power? I want to give you a moment to genuinely, quietly reflect on that. What is the one thing you are absolutely terrified to bring into the light? What is the specific wound you are hiding under the heavy winter coat, aggressively pretending it doesn't hurt, pretending it isn't infected?
Let it come to mind.
Maybe it is a substance. Maybe you tell yourself you can quit drinking or taking those pills anytime you want, that it's just to take the edge off a stressful job. But deep down, in the quiet of the night, you know you can't stop. Maybe it is a relationship that is fundamentally toxic and destructive, a relationship that is eroding your soul, but you are so terrified of the vast emptiness of being alone that you keep defending it. Maybe it is a deep-seated, simmering anger or a bitter resentment against someone who hurt you decades ago. It is poisoning your heart, affecting how you treat your own children, but you feel completely justified in holding on to it because they were wrong. Maybe it is a hidden financial disaster you've been covering up from your spouse, shifting money around to hide the debt. Maybe it is a secret habit on your computer late at night that fills you with shame the next morning. Or maybe it is a profound trauma from your past, a violation that you swore you would take to the grave, completely unwilling to speak of it again. Look at your life. What is the area where you are still desperately trying to play God? What is the pain you are stubbornly refusing to feel?
It takes immense, uncommon bravery to answer that question honestly. The immediate human instinct will be to deflect. Your mind will instantly try to rationalize your behavior, or will try to point the finger at someone else's behavior to justify your own.
It's not my fault.
Right. You'll think, well, if my spouse treated me better, I wouldn't need a drink. Or if my boss wasn't so demanding, I wouldn't be so angry. That is the denial trying to reassert control. But right now, in this moment, is just you and the Lord. No one else is listening to the answer forming in your heart. You don't have to manage my perception or your spouse's perception or your pastor's perception. You can just be rigorously, brutally honest.
It's so freeing.
It is. The denial has kept you isolated for so long, and its primary weapon is the lie. That if you truly face this thing, if you name the ugly reality, you will have to face it all alone in the dark. But that is the final and most devastating lie of the enemy. Because here is the crucial spiritual comforts, the ultimate foundational hope of the entire recovery journey. When we finally decide to face our pain, we never, ever face it alone.
Never, not for a single second. The moment you step into the light, you realize the room is already occupied.
Yes. Jesus Christ meets us in the very center of our deepest anguish. He doesn't stand at the finish line of our recovery, arms crossed, tapping his foot, waiting for us to figure it out, get clean, process our trauma, and put ourselves back together before he will accept us.
Praise God for that.
That is a false religion, and that is certainly not recovery. He enters the absolute mess with us. The very moment we hit the wall, the moment the pain surpasses the fear and we cry out like David did, "Lord, have mercy on me, for my soul is in deep anguish," he is right there. He meets us in the dark. He meets us in the shame, in the fear, and in the throbbing pain of the infection. He specializes in the broken places. When you finally drop the heavy burden of denial, you aren't dropping it into a cold, empty void. You're dropping it directly into the scarred hands of a Savior who already knows absolutely everything about it, who has seen the worst of you, and who loves you completely and fiercely anyway.
He steps into the room the exact moment you stop locking the door.
Wow.
Taking action one, stopping the denial, is unquestionably the hardest step. It goes against every single instinct of our pride and our fear. It requires us to acknowledge that our way, our brilliant plan for managing our own lives, has completely, utterly failed. It requires us to feel the full, unmedicated weight of our agony, but it is the most crucial step in finishing Principle 1. It is the doorway to true healing. You cannot treat a disease you refuse to admit you have. You cannot be found until you admit, without caveat or condition, that you are entirely lost.
And the absolute beauty of this journey is that while action 1 is the hardest, most terrifying step, it is also the one that violently opens the floodgates of grace. When the pain finally surpasses the fear, when you hit that concrete wall and surrender your illusion of control, you are making the only move that allows God to begin his restorative work in your life.
Exactly.
The tipping point feels like the end of your life, but in reality, it is the exact place where your true life finally begins. It is the necessary death of the facade, paving the way for the resurrection of the authentic self.
So as we close this time together, as we wrap up this heart-to-heart on Action 1, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. I want you to carry this specific thought with you throughout your week. Let it echo in your mind when the fear rises up, when you feel the overwhelming urge to pull that heavy coat back tightly around yourself and go back to faking it. Think about this. What if the very pain you are running from today is the exact place where Jesus is waiting to give you your life back?
What a profound truth to hold on to. Thank you all for having the courage to join us for this incredibly important step in the journey.
We invite you to continue walking this road with the community at Peters Creek Baptist Church in South Park, Pennsylvania. We would love to see you in person, to shake your hand, and to walk alongside you. Here is our weekly Friday schedule.
Yeah?
6:30 p.m., large group worship.
Awesome.
Special note, on Friday, May 8th, during large group, there will be a men's step study completion ceremony. Please join us to celebrate these brothers.
Can't wait for that.
7:30 to 8:30 p.m., gender-specific small groups.
Yep.
8:30 to 9 p.m., Crosstalk Cafe.
And then the food.
Right. Dinner is served from 5:15 to 6 p.m., but please note this is on the final Friday of each month only.
You're finding a group. If you are not local, please find a Celebrate Recovery near you by heading to crlocator.com and entering your zip code.
And contact. You can email Craig Amstone at craig.amstone@gmail.com or contact the church office at info@pcbc.church.
Keep coming back.
It works if you work it, and you are worth it. God bless you all, and we will see you at the cafe.